On this episode, we'll talk about an important part of wildlife photography, especially when you shoot the Canon R3 or the Canon R5, the Nikon Z9 or the new Nikon Z8. And more especially talk about the CFExpress Type B memory card. We'll talk about why that card is crucial to wildlife photography, why not all cards are built the same, and I think I have a card that you're really going to like. So let's head back to the house because it's about going to rain here in just a minute, and let's talk about it. Well, I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to the channel. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe, click that bell notification so you'll be notified anytime a new video is uploaded. It should be a busy summer. We've got some very wild trips planned to see Kodiak bears, puffins, and many other amazing Alaskan wildlife. Now, there's three main components of gear that are essential: the camera body, the lens, and the memory card. And without the card, there are no images. That can really affect photography experience, especially with Canon and Nikon's recent mirrorless cameras I've got here. The R3, the R5, the Z8, and the Z9. Why am I talking about Canon and Nikon? Well, it's what I shoot. And all these cameras take the CFExpress Type B card, which is the fastest write speed in the memory cards currently in use. With these cameras shooting 20 to 30 frames per second, and all but the R3 images having file sizes of 45 megabytes, that is a lot of data to move from the camera to the memory card. On top of this, the cameras shoot raw, high-resolution video and frame rates ranging from 8K 60 to 4K 120. Again, tremendous amount of data to move, which requires a lot of write speed to accomplish. The old faithful SD cards, even the newest UHS-2 V90 cards pushing 300 megabytes a second, can't handle the max video specs these cameras can produce and the frames per second and the file size of the images they take. But luckily, these cameras can take the CFExpress Type B cards, and these things are fast. Most can read at 1700 megabytes a second and write anywhere from 1200 to 18 megabytes per second. And as I stated earlier, it's the write speed that's the most important in the field. And that's why these things are really important to us when we're going out taking photos. Now, one thing to watch out for the Type B cards is not the max write speed, but rather the minimum or sustained write speed. Even if a card will state it has a 1400, 1700 megabyte per second write speed, its sustained write speed can be much lower. A lot of the times it's not written on the card, and you have to go to the manufacturer's website to find out the sustained write speed. As in the case of one of these cards we'll talk about, the sustained write speed is not listed on the card or the manufacturer's website. Okay, what does that even matter what the speed is if these cards are all really fast? Well, it still is going to be how fast the camera can get the file off the camera and onto the card and try to keep that buffer cleared, which results in more shots before it hits the buffer wall and the camera goes into reduced frame rate mode. And in the case of video, can the speed handle the bit rate? If it's not able to stay sustained at the bit rate, the recording stops. Bad stuff. With all that how and why out of the way, let's talk about the star of today's video. It's this little fella. It's the Exascend Essential CFExpress Type B 1 terabyte memory card. There's a lot to say. The card touts at 1800 megabytes per second read speed and 1700 megabyte per second max write speed. And the most important part, remember about sustained speed, is 1480 megabytes per second sustained write speed. The card is certified by DJI, RED, BMD, and Zcam. You know, all the good things you want to know about reliability and purposes that the card is going to do what it says it's going to do. So all this sounds good on paper, but does it hold up and is it a good memory card? Well, spoiler alert, it is fantastic. I've been using this card in the field for the last 2 weeks exclusive with the Z9, shooting lossless RAW, which is the biggest file, and video resolutions of 8K 60 and 4K 120. No drops in video have been found, no issues in the stills and lockups of the camera, really no issues with this card. Now, the leading card on the market currently is the Delkin Black. It sports a 1530 megabytes per second sustained write speed. There are plenty of videos out on YouTube comparing the Delkin Black to other cards in the market with this card edging them all out. So this is the card we're going to benchmark against Exascend, which is about the best on the market. And if this Exascend holds up to the Delkin Black, is really close, that's going to be amazing. So let's test these two head-to-head and see how they perform in stills and in video. And I'm going to add a third card in the mix also. It's the Sony 128GB CFExpress Type B Tough Memory Card. This card is actually an example of sustained write speed not listed on the card or the manufacturer's website. The only thing we have to go on is it states 1480 megabyte per second max or burst write speed, so we don't know what sustained write speed is going to be. Here's how we'll conduct the test of these cards and really see how the Exascend performs and stacks up to the others. We'll use the Nikon Z9 and the Z8 first, and we'll shoot in lossless RAW, which produces the largest and most information in the RAW files. And then we'll shoot a burst at 20 frames a second until the frame rate buffer stops and then drops into reduced frame rate. We'll record the amount of stills captured in that burst and the amount of time it takes to reach that mark. Then we'll run a 10-second burst and get the number of images captured and do the same math to extract the 20 frames per second shots and the time to give us the reduced frame rate. Now note that the Z9 and the Z8 will keep shooting as long as you hold down the shutter button and the card has storage left but a reduced frame rate. And then we'll see if the cards can record in RAW 8K 60, 8K 30, and 4K 120. And thanks to the guys down at Stewart's Photo again here in Anchorage, because I was able to go down there and get a rental of the Canon R5 so I can do these same tests with the Type B against the R5. I didn't bother getting the R3 because really the file sizes are larger on these cameras versus the R3, and probably not many of you have the R3, so that's why I didn't do it. So yeah, thanks to those guys again for helping me out and getting this rental and getting it out so I can get this test done on these cards to show you if this Exascend is really a good value. All right, let's get into testing these cards. We're going to start with the Sony card first. I've already ran the test already because I was trying to get 10 good samples, which means sometimes I had to go 25, 30 times on each test, because I was trying to get it where I would do the 20 frames a second stop before I hit that reduced shutter rate. You'll see that happen here in a minute, to how hard it is to stop it and not get a few extra frames. So I wanted that for the numbers, so I did all that work prior. We're going to show you what it looks like here, how many shots it gets before the buffer, and in the 10 second after that to show you what it sounds like once it gets in that reduced frame rate and what those frame rates are. So we're going to start with the Sony camera here, Sony card, excuse me, not the Sony camera, Nikon camera. So all right, let's do this one with the Sony first. So let's go 20 frames a second and try to stop it. Nah, I got it that time. So what you'll notice in the bottom right is there is a countdown to go 21 down to 0, and I can stop it right there. So let's see how many frames we got. So we got about 66, and that's a little higher than my test was because I'm shooting, you see here, a black background and one of my studio lights here. And so that's what you're seeing in that. And what I was shooting before was a well-lit subject with controlled lights, so it's going to eat up more, so it's going to be a little slower in the frame rate, or the amount of shots you get. So let's do this. We're going to do the 10 second, just to show you. It sounds like once you hit the buffer. All right. So we're going to do this for about 10 seconds. Do I have a stopwatch on here? I do. All right, let's go. That's a reduced frame rate. A little over 10 seconds. Let's see what we got. So I got a touch over. So 114, that's a little more than my test showed. But what you heard there is after we went past that 20 frames a second is where you hear that stutter. And that's where the reduced frame rate is on that. So for the Z9 for the Sony, the numbers are what I was getting consistently in the 20 frames a second before I hit the wall of the buffer. I was getting 55 shots at 2.9 seconds. And the 10 second burst, I was getting 107 shots before we got 10 seconds. So between those two, that left me at 52 at 7.1 seconds left, which gives us a 7.32 frames per second once you hit that buffer. So you're at 20 frames a second, then you go 7.3 frames a second after that. It'll go just forever doing that. So that's the Sony card. So I want to show you the Sony first, which we don't know what the sustained write speed of that card, because it's not listed on the site, not listed on the card. All right, now let's test the Delk and show you what it looks like. Like I said, these numbers are not going to be exactly the same as what my tests were, so keep that in mind. So, all right, let's... Whoop, got a little over there. And we're set 74, but numbers a little different, so we'll do that. So now let's do the 10-second burst test. All right. a lot faster, right? All right, there we go. And take 74 off that. So yeah, about 160 or so. But what you heard there is you notice that once you hit that wall into that buffer on this Delkin card, it's much faster when it's doing there. Before with the Sony, it was a lot more stuttered. All right, so what are the numbers for the Delkin? The Delkin was getting 80 shots at 4 seconds. Perfect, that's what we expect to see. We were getting 172 shots at 10 seconds. So that left 92 shots with a difference of 6 seconds. So that resulted in a 15.33 frames per second once it hit the wall. That's fantastic. So you're getting your 20 frames a second for 4 second 80 shots, and then you're getting 15.3, about 15 frames a second after that, pretty much until you run out of the cards. It'll just keep going and keep going and keep going. It'll keep up with that buffer. So that is our benchmark. We're wanting to have something around, once it hits the buffer at 1533, and we also want it to be at 80 frames a second. That's what we want to have to. So can we get close to 80 frames a second with the Exascend, and can we get close to 15.3 in the reduced frame rate on this camera? So let's turn this guy off, change the cards out, and go with the Exascend here. All right. Turn the camera back on. All right. Make sure I delete. Yes, we're deleted. So, all right. So get ready. And here we go. Oop, a little over again. 72. We had 74 a while. Both of them went a little bit over. So let's do the 10-second burst so you see what that sounds like. So it's after when you hit that wall, I'll point to you and hit that wall so you can kind of hear how the click, click, click sound. Sounds about the same as the Delkin. We'll see. I didn't time that one, but that's fine. So, all right. So what is the result for the Exascend? So the Exascend was getting 78 frames, 2 off, 3.88 seconds before it hit the wall consistently. So 2 frames off, pretty good. We were getting 170 shots at the 10-second burst. So we're 2 shots off there again, pretty consistent. So that led to us a 92 frames difference once you hit the wall. We had 92 frames we got after that within the 10 seconds, leaving 6.12 seconds. 1503. So 1533 to 1503 for the Nikon Z9 for the Exascend. That is fantastic. So from testing on the Z9, the Delkin and the Exascend are neck right there with each other. I mean, it's so minuscule. That's almost probably sample rate difference, So I think they're pretty close to the same card. They work the same. So that is fantastic for this card. And as you see, the Sony is way lower. So once you got into that reduced frame rate, these other two were 15 frames a second, 7, almost half. We're getting 55 shots and about 80 out of the others. So this Sony card for within the Nikon here, Z9, it is lower. So the Sony card, it works still fine. You can still shoot, you still get a lot of shots, but you're going to get a lot more shots if you're using the Delkin. And then what our card we're talking about today, the subject, the star of our show, the subject of our show is this Exascend card here, that 1 terabyte. So now let's change cameras and we will do the Z8 just to see what's different. And I'm going to do a separate video about the buffers of these 2 cameras because there's something interesting here. So let me turn all this guy off, get everything out of here, and change this out. Be back with you in a second. So once again, we're going to start with the Sony card again. I just got this Z8, so I just got it set up, and the only stuff I've done so far is testing this. I haven't even gone outside really, except for this morning real briefly. I shot a couple birds when I did the intro to this video. So let's see how it does. Now, the reason I talked about I'm going to do a video on these 2, there's a difference when you use the single card versus dual cards. I'll have a whole separate video on that on the buffer on these things. So let's make sure we have everything deleted, which we do not. Delete that. All right, so the Z8 with the Sony card. Let's do our before burst. Little sharp there. Got a couple extra 6158 is about what I expected. So let's do the 10-second burst. So you see what that sounds like once you hit that wall. So that's what it sounds like with the Sony. It's pretty much like the Z9, but let's check the numbers real quick on the Sony. So on the Sony, on the Z8, this is what was interesting. We were getting 63 consecutive at 3.28 seconds. We were getting 55 on the Z9, so we were getting, 8 more frames in here and about a third of a second more. That's really interesting. So it looks like the frame rate in the buffer is a little bit better here. So that put us at about 10 frames a second in reduce. We were getting 7.32. So it seems like, and we'll do some more testing with these two on cards, that it's a little better on the Z8. I kept seeing that they're exactly the same, so I want to do some more testing and make a whole video on that on there. So now let's change this out and let's go to the Delkin card. All right, the Delkin, we'll do the 20 frames first, or the 20 frames second till we hit the wall. Well, it was a lot longer. 101 in that, so, and I barely hit the wall there, so. All right, we're going to do the 10-second. Losing about a half second when I do that. Here's the wall. That's crazy. That sounds like by auditory that it's getting a lot more. I did go a touch over that. I didn't even stop it. 179 in there. So what was my testing? So my testing was for the black, Delkin black, I was getting 112 frames in there at 5.5 seconds. 187 frames at 10 seconds. So almost double what the Sony card was doing. So that left me with 75 shots after the buffer wall at 4.45 seconds. So I was getting 16.85 frames per second after it hit that wall. Again, that keeps going forever. We'll talk about why that's important here in a bit after we do the Exascend on these two cameras. So that's where we're at. So we were at 10 frames after the wall. In the reduced frame, 16.85, almost back to the 20 frames a second. That's really, really good. So let's do the Exascend last. Well, I like this door a lot better than the Z9. I know the Z9 door is a lot more weatherproofed and sealed because of everything with that lock, but I like this door better. It's easier to get open. All right, let's delete those pictures. I don't know if these numbers and this stuff is very interesting to you guys. Let me know if you like the numbers, the testing, and things like that. I think you're getting in the weeds, but I kind of have fun doing this. It's really nice to see what these cameras are doing. I'm kind of, so far with the Delkin Black, I'm surprised that I was getting about, from 15.33 to 16.85, I was getting, an extra frame and a half a second more with that. So let's see how this one performs. So let's do the 20 first. For the buffer wall. Got a few extra in there. What is it showing me? I was getting 104 here. Pretty close to what the end numbers are. Let's go ahead and zero this back out. And let's do 10 seconds. Here we go, just a touch over. 175. So what was my testing numbers? So my testing numbers were, and I probably read this about 30 times. It was very annoying getting these numbers because I was trying to get it where I did not go over that wall. I was getting 115 frames, 5.7 seconds. Was getting average, and I did even more just to go, I can't believe the Exascend on the Z8 is getting a little bit better than the Z9. Now, three shots, that's it. 115, 5.7. In the 10-second burst, 188. Remember, the Delkin was 187, one extra shot, and I just did it over and over and over to get that. So that leaves me with 73 shots after the buffer wall, 4.3 seconds, which gave me 16.97. You know, if you round both these up, they're both to 17, but a tenth of a second more frames per second. So it actually beat its 0.12 more frames per second in the testing I did with the Exascend versus the Delkin Black on the Z8. Like I said, I'm doing more testing to find out why I'm getting better frames per second. I went through all the settings of these cameras both, and they're both set up exactly the same. We're using the same RAW, the same settings, same everything, the same aperture, same everything, same lens, you name it. So I'll do some more testing, but I also want to show you the difference if you're using SD Plus in this one or dual SD in this one over here. Anyway, so interesting numbers. So let's talk about why this is important, in my opinion. So if you've got the Sony card in here, or a card that's not as fast, or if you're trying to run the SD, you're just in trouble. So let's not do that. Let's run the CFExpress Type Bs, because that's the fastest thing. Wildlife, we want to get fast, we want to get a lot, and we want to get a lot more time if we can out of things. So if you're using the Sony Express, you know, while you're getting a Z9 and this, you're getting 109, 130 in a 10-second burst. And the other two, you're getting 170, almost 190 out of it. So you're getting, you know, a lot more frames. And why is that important? If you have a Swan, and Swan takes about, you know, quite a long way to get off the ground. So it's not like a 3-second burst. You got it, they're all flying. But with that, it could be 10, 15 seconds of that bird trying to get his butt off the ground. So with these cards, going from 20 frames a second to almost 17 frames a second for almost forever is phenomenal if you're using the black or the Exascend. And the Exascend's the one we'll have another reason why I'm really excited about this card versus the Delkin. I love the Delkin, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So that is where the frame rate is on that. Fantastic. So my main point is this Exascend card is as fast, and with the Z8 a little bit faster than the fastest card I've been using that I've seen a lot of reviews on. This Delkin Black, look it up yourself, everything. This Exascend is a phenomenal card. So now on to the R5. So with the R5, there's no reason maybe to hook this up and let you listen to it because there's no sound. When you're in 20 frames a second, you got no sound. So I, again, set the same way with RAW and did it. So let me just give you the numbers on the R5, all right? One of the reasons I rented the R5, the guys, again, down at Stewart's are just awesome too. They have so many good cameras in stock, so I pretty much can always find them. The summer's a little harder because of rentals, because we have a lot of tourists come up and they rent these things out to test them. Another reason I got it was to Z8 R5 video coming up soon. Spoiler, and I'm going to do a lot more with this Z8 here to show you. But anyway, to the numbers. Quit rambling here, Scott. So, Sony Tough. This is where it got interesting with the Canon cameras. When they hit the wall, they don't get as many frames past the initial camera buffer. Once you get to that reduced rate, it's a lot less. 80 frames out of the Nikon at 4.3 seconds, which was weird. Always it was 4.3 every time we hit 80. At the 10-second burst, I was getting 131 frames, which leaves me at 51 frames at 5.7 seconds after the buffer. So this is when the camera's trying to get those images off the camera onto the card and still trying to take shots, going to keep up. And that was 8.94. So what was our Z9? You know, we were getting 7.32, and the Z8 we're getting 10. So right between the two. So real interesting. Now for the more interesting part, the Delkin. Now for Nikon, we saw major improvement. 80 frames, 4.28 seconds, consistently. Almost exactly the same as the Sony and the Delkin. Crazy, right? When we went into, so we checked it as 50 frames difference, 5.72, 8.74 was 8.94. So Sony actually beat the Delkin out just by a hair. Now into the, if I can turn the camera off. The Exascend, how'd the Exascend do with the other two? 81 frames, 4.32. Got 1 frame extra than the other two. I got 132 out of a 10-second burst. So it was 51 frames, 5.68, 8.97, right there with the Sony Tough. So really interesting to see with the R5, every one of these match the same. Now, we also have to remember that the file size is smaller in this one over here. So the whatever the read speed on the Sony Tough probably just keeps up versus the larger file size. And this guy is probably not keeping up in these two Nikon cameras. The file's a lot bigger, got more information in it. So with the R5, what's interesting is it's pretty much a wash on all three cards for the frame rates. With the Nikon, two Nikons, the Delkin and the Exascend, phenomenal. So the whole point of doing these tests and time was, one, with the Sony to show you the sustained write speed can affect the camera like it does with these Nikons here, and we'll talk about video just in a second. But the whole point was this Exascend keeps up with one of the best cards on the market, this Delkin Black. Great. And we'll talk about the best thing here in a bit, but now let's talk about video. All right, now let's test the video on the two Nikon cameras. We're going to test it in the 8K60, 8K30, and the 4K 120. So first, let's do the Sony Tough, see what it does. I know what the Z9 does. Let's see what the Z8 does, see if it does the same thing. So we're at 8K60 right now, and we're going to record. Yep, that's what I expected. 8 seconds it failed. The Nikon was failing at 7 seconds pretty much every time in 8K60. So the Sony Tough card on these two cameras cannot handle in RAW. So there's one change you can do. We are doing in RAW high quality. If we move it to normal, on the Nikon Z9 it would run, but you couldn't do it in high for 8K60. The whole point of going 8K60 is to get an in RAW is to get the best quality you can get. So let's test it here, see if it runs, because the 8K60 in normal ran on the Z9. Let's see if it runs on here. Now again, these are extreme video bit rates. So if we can get to a minute, we'll be good. I'll jump cut to that so you don't sit through it. So yeah, it passes, it's working. I could sit here forever and watch it, but I know with this guy, it worked. So let's go ahead and stop that. And let's change this, let's get back in here. Let's change this back to high. Let's go here to 8K 24 frames, because I don't shoot 30K, 8K 24. Let's get in here and see if she runs. If it fails, I'll let you know. And yes, it passes. So the only thing that the Sony Tough card will not run is 8K60 in high. It will run all the other formats that the Nikon Z9 and the Z8 will do, which is really good. All right, let's test the Delkin card. If it passes 8K60 in RAW in high quality, then it will work on all the other codecs. All we gotta do is make it past that. So let's make sure, yes, we're in 8K60 in RAW high. All right, so let's hit it and see what we get. See if she passes. Let you know. So yes, it passes. The Nikon Z9 and the Z8 both pass the highest bit rate of video that it can perform at. Now overheating is a different issue. Camera's not so much, but the cards come out of this thing pretty hot after using it for quite a while. I did test with the Z9 and with this Delkin card. It's only 150 gigabyte. It's 7 minutes at 8K60 and high, and it runs until the memory runs out of the card. So now the Exascend, let's test it, see if it can run, which we assume it does. The Delkin did, because this card and the Delkin are right with each other. So let's check. All right, so 8K60 says I have 23 minutes with this one. And start recording, see if she passes. With the Z9, it did pass, which I assume the Z8 is going to pass also. And it ran until it ran out of storage on the camera. So we'll see. Be back in a second. So yeah, the Z8 passes also for the video test, which I figured it would with the Exascend card. So the Exascend card works well too. All right, for as far as the Canon, I did test the video codecs on the Canon. The Canon does A265. It's not as a taxing format as the NRAW. Ran it in C-Log, ran the highest quality it could at 8K 24. This won't record 8K 60, but we'll do 8K 30, 8K 24, 8K 29.97 also. It passed with flying colors, and it passed on all three cards. On the Sony Tough that's still down there on the ground, and because it fell off the table. Haven't gone there and got it yet. And the Exascend and the black. It all works on fine. So all the codecs work fine on the R5 for video, which is really good. So what's the summary of all this with the Nikon Z8, Z9, and the R5 test is that sustained speed really matters, especially in stills, especially if you're running these Nikon cameras a little bit more. With the Canon is not as bad with the Sony card as the other two, but with the Nikon cards it really suffered. So in stills, sustained speed really matters to keep shooting as you want to go along on these newer cameras. For video, yes, it does matter, but it only matters if you're really wanting to shoot that 8K 60 high. You really want to shoot that top quality that these two cameras do. If you do, you need to get a really fast sustained speed, which this Exascend does do. Now, for the biggest reason why I'm talking about this Exascend card, and I could be talking about the Delkin Black X650, but there's a reason why I really like this card. One, it's as fast as the fastest card that's really on the market, the Delkin Black. But the major part and the allure to this card, it's the dollars per gigabyte. The Delkin Black comes in at 150 gigabyte, 325 gigabyte, 655 gigabyte model. And the dollar per gigabyte is $1.2 with the 650 card, clocking it at $750. Yes, these cards are expensive. Now, the Exascend card comes in 256 gigabyte, 512 gigabytes, and 1 terabyte, which is the one I have here. And the dollar per gigabyte number, 47 cents. $1.2, 47 cents. This 1 gigabyte card is $469 for 1 terabyte. It's equivalent about a third of the price of if you had this Delkin Black at 1 terabyte. This would be a third of the price of that card, and it performs exactly the same. So, and the build quality of this card is a tank. It feels better to me, actually, than the Delkin Black when you're kind of touching. It's metal all the way around. The only plastic is a little bit of black. It's got about the same, but the metal feels better. It may be because there's a 1 terabyte piece of memory here versus the 150 gigabyte. Maybe that's why it feels a little more solid, but it feels tankier and tougher. But again, a third of the price of the other one. And to be able to have a 1 terabyte memory card that works well and makes my field work much more efficient is awesome. I can now shoot video at the higher resolutions and capture stills on the same card without worrying about having to use a ton of cards during the day, because most days I have to run both my Sony and this guy to fill them both up. I'm at 300 or a little less than 300 gigabytes, and I now have 1 terabyte in this card, which is just amazing. And the dollar amount for having those two cards at 300 is more than this 1 terabyte card. All right, for a wrap up of the Exascend Essential Type B memory card, again, that's a mouthful to say. This thing is fast as the Delkin, which is currently the benchmark card on the market. It supports all the video formats of Canon and Nikon. It's certified DJI Red, all those things you want to be certified for to know that this card will handle everything you're going to do. You can't get those certifications just nilly-willy. And the price per gigabyte is one of the best on the market. I may say it's the best once you add in its performance on top of it. That is as fast as that. You get that many shots out of it. And the ability to have all that in a 1 terabyte card, and the more time in the field on this card, not having to change it out. So I also have the, get this paper out of the way, I don't need it anymore. I have the Exascend card reader, the Type B card reader. It's also a Type B plus an SD card reader, really cool. It's a 2-in-1. It's capable of up to 10 gigabyte transfer speeds, but your bus and your computer is going to get you there. The transfer speeds I'm getting out of this guy is 900 write, 900 read, phenomenal. Anything above 500 on these readers is really good. The best one I found in the market that I was using right there was a Lexar, using a Thunderbolt 3 cable that you have to plug into it, so you get both cables separate. That guy was transferring just a little under 800 with the Exascend and the black. With this one, I'm getting 900 write, 900 read. Phenomenal, great. And this thing feels good. It's made out of metal, a little bit of plastic here in the front. The dongle cable's really, or the cable's not a dongle, it's actually attached. It's really good. And this thing's made of metal. Like I said, it feels like a tank. It doesn't feel like you're going to break this guy if you drop it. So if you drop it, I'm not as worried about this guy. As my other one, the Lexar, is just plastic. All the ones I've used are plastic. This guy is really, really well made. Well, folks, I hope you found this video helpful. And to know more about CFExpress Type B cards for the Canon R3, the R5, the Z8, and the Z9, and a very exciting CFExpress Type B card offered by Exascend that I think is a great value and a performance memory card. Just fantastic. And as always, folks, like, share, subscribe, hit that bell notification so you don't miss a video. Until the next time, get out there and go run that shutter.